The LA Kings top line shows up in a big way in a big win over the Blackhawks. We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, or we would love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, it was a bit of a different day on the schedule for the LA Kings, and if you have kind of followed the show, Friday's a little bit of a different day for me personally. You know, Monday through Thursday, I have my same routine. I work an overnight shift. I get up in the afternoon. I work on the show, record it around 4 or 5 o'clock, and then get on with the rest of my day. But on Fridays, it's a little bit different. Fridays, I have some other things that go on during the day. So usually a Friday episode of Locked on LA Kings will either be really early, like around noon, or really late, like around 10 p.m. And since the Kings were playing a early evening game on Friday, which they haven't done much outside of the Western United States, and I believe this was the first time this year they've played a Friday game outside of the Western U.S., it gave us an opportunity, because I was going to do the show late anyway, to actually recap a game that has already been played a few hours ago. So a little bit different than what we normally do. So we are going to recap the Kings against the Chicago Blackhawks. So LA taking on the Blackhawks. This is game 2 of their 3-game road trip. Kings currently in a battle for the number 3 spot in the Pacific Division, while Chicago is, well, they were the first team to be eliminated from the playoffs so far this season. They are probably, frankly, better off losing, so they get a better shot at the number 1 overall pick for a second consecutive season. Of course, they took Connor Bedard, winning the draft lottery last year, and they are among the worst teams in the NHL. So the Kings came into the game tonight against Chicago 33-21-11, third place in the Pacific. We'll tell you how that was still the case in the standings a little bit later. 7th place in the Western Conference, 12th place in the NHL, 77 points for the Kings going into the game against Chicago. LA 19-10-4 on the road coming into this game. And in their last game, the Kings did lose in St. Louis to the Blues by a score of 3-1 on Wednesday. Chicago came in with a record of 18-43-5, 6th place in the Central Division, 15th place in the Western Conference. Only San Jose is worse, and 31st in the NHL out of 32 teams with 41 points. Again, only the Sharks have fewer points in the NHL. Blackhawks were 13-17-4 at home this season. They were coming off a 7-2 home win over the Ducks on Tuesday. Not surprisingly, the Kings were better statistically in every major category: goals scored, goals allowed, power play, penalty kill, all heavily in favor of the Kings against the Blackhawks. As for the 2 netminders, the Kings, somewhat surprisingly, went with Cam Talbot in this one against Chicago. Record coming in of 19-16-6, 2.49 goals against average, .916 save percentage with the 1 shutout. His last game was Wednesday in St. Louis, where he allowed 3 goals on 30 shots in the loss. The Blackhawks would start Arvid Soderblom. He would not finish the game, but he would start it. He's their number 2 goalie. Came in with a record of 4-18-1, 3.89 goals against average, and an .881 save percentage. He did win his last 2 starts, both against the Coyotes recently. As for the lineup for the LA Kings in this one, the Kings, unsurprisingly, sticking with this 11-7 lineup, 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. Once again, it would be Arthur Kaliev on the outside looking in, but there was one lineup change, and I think this is a lineup change for the better, frankly. Adrian Kempe taken off the third line, moved up on the top line with Anze Kopitar and Quinton Byfield. That meant that Alex Turcotte was moved off the top line and back down to the third line with Pierre Dubois and Alex Laferriere. And I think that top line needs to remain Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield. We'll talk more about that as we go along. But that was the lineup for the LA Kings against the Chicago Blackhawks. And one note, Mikey Anderson, of course, back from his injury. He's playing, and he was opposed by his brother, his older brother, now playing for the Chicago Blackhawks in this one. If you missed the game, well, you missed a good one for the Kings. We'll give you a recap of this one. A terrific start for LA, dominating the opening period. They scored not one, not two, not three, but 4 goals in the first period. Pierre Dubois got LA on the board with a much-needed power play goal, snapping a streak of 5 games without a goal on the power play. Jordan Spence and Philip Deneau picked up the assists for Dubois' 15th goal of the season. Rookie Alex Laferriere would deflect in a Matt Roy point shot to make it 2-0 Kings. Pierre Dubois also assisting for Laferriere, his 10th of the season. Anze Kopitar scored his first of 2 goals that were both assisted by Quinton Byfield. First goal, a beautiful passing play that saw Kopi drop it to Adrian Kempe, who dropped it to Quinton Byfield, who then found Kopitar at the side of the net for a wide open net, and Kopi would not miss that one. His 19th of the year. Q and Juice with the assists, and Kopitar would score his 2nd of the period, 2nd of the game, 20th of the season on a tap-in after Quinton Byfield made a spectacular cross-ice backhand pass to Kopitar, who was sitting at the back door. He just tapped it in. Kings in the second period would only score 1 goal. They already had the 4-0 lead, so they really didn't need many more. Defenseman Jordan Spence getting his first goal of the season, 3rd of his career, just put a shot on net from the side, kind of a bad angle, and it squirted through the goalie's pads. By the way, the Blackhawks pulled their goalie after the 4th goal, put in Peter Mrazek, their number 1. Didn't really matter at that point. Alex Laferriere and Andreas Englund getting assists on the Jordan Spence goal. We would have a scoreless third period, and the Kings would skate off with a convincing 5-0 win. Kings improved to 34-21-11 on the season. As far as the game stats in this one, again, Chicago losing to the Kings by a score of 5-0. Shots on goal favored LA 37-28. Power plays, Kings were 1 for 3. Chicago was 0 for 4. Faceoffs favored the Kings 31-28. Block shots favored LA 19-15. And hits did favor Chicago 23-8. We had a quote from Kings head coach Jim Hiller afterwards. He said, quote, "It was great to get off to the lead, but what we saw was Talbot," talking about Cam Talbot, "had to make 2 or 3 big saves early. It could have been a different game. So credit the goalie there. Nice to see the puck go in for us. We had a lot of good chances in St. Louis, so we wanted to play the same offensive game, just clean up a couple of mistakes. It was nice to see the puck go in for us," end quote. That was Kings head coach Jim Hiller. So as far as the takeaways from this one, obviously a lot of great things for the Kings, but I do think that Jim Hiller made a good observation. There were a couple of chances early on, a couple of bad turnovers by the Kings that maybe against better teams turn into goals. And maybe that changes the complexion of the game. But credit Cam Talbot, and we'll talk more about him a little bit when we get to our 3 stars of the game. But a lot of good for the Kings. Just the way they came out, the way they skated, took it to the Blackhawks. And, I guess if there was one word to describe the win over Chicago, it was probably convincing. The Blackhawks are outclassed by the Kings as they should have been in this one. So the Kings took care of business, not taking anything away from them. It was good to see not only how they played, but some of the players that got on the scoreboard, which we'll talk more about in a second. But Kings taking care of business, which is exactly what they should have done. Come out, play your game. And if you're playing a team that's one of the worst teams in the league, you probably should see a convincing score like the 5-0 win for the LA Kings. As far as the 3 stars of the game, it's always nice when you have several players to choose from. Alex Laferriere had a 2-point night with a goal and assist. Pierre Dubois had a 2-point night with a goal and assist. Jordan Spence had a 2-point night with a goal and an assist. But I'm going to go with my number 3 star, the man mentioned by head coach Jim Hiller, and that would be goaltender Cam Talbot. Stopped all 28 shots he faced, earned his 31st career shutout, 2nd as a King. improved overall to 20, 16, and 6 in the season. And nice to see him bounce back after that loss to the Blues. Not that he was terrible against St. Louis, but he did allow one questionable goal that ended up being kind of a big goal. Certainly he was the beneficiary of a lot of offensive support, which is good. But like Jim Hiller said, there were a couple of saves he made early on that were really important after a couple of Kings turnovers. He doesn't make those saves, and that could be big. So when you have a goalie that can really erase some mistakes, that is a big deal. Number 2 star for me, Quinton Byfield. He is taking it to another level, obviously, this year, but his passing is at times spectacular. I know Kevin Fiala gets a lot of credit for some of his passing, and he's certainly a fine passer as well, but Byfield's decision-making and the way he can make it look so easy, the backhand pass on the Kopitar second goal was something. I mean, I think if you're a Blackhawks defender, you're thinking he's not going to be able to make that pass. He's probably not even going to think about making that pass. Well, not only did he think about doing it, he put it perfectly where it had to be on the backhand. Fantastic for Quinton Byfield. Assists 29 and 30 on the season, and that was his 12th multi-point game of the year. Quinton Byfield, just again, spectacular with his passing decisions in that game against the Blackhawks. But the number 1 star is going to go to the captain, Anze Kopitar, with his 2 goals, numbers 19 and 20 on the season. It's his second multi-goal game this year, and he reaches the 20-goal mark in a season for the 13th time in his career. No other LA King has done that. Luc Robitaille, Dave Taylor, and Marcel Dion all had 12 seasons where they scored 20 or more goals. No one else has had 13. Anze Kopitar making some history for the LA Kings. So again, the Kings, look, they're going to the playoffs. So there aren't necessarily any must wins for the Kings going forward. Now, they do have some big matchups. They've got the Oilers on March the 28th. They've got 2 games against the Canucks, one on March the 25th, one on April the 6th. And those could all be first round playoff previews. So those are games of importance, but I don't know that there are any must-win games left for the Kings. They're going to get in the playoffs. The way they're playing right now, the teams they're playing right now, they still have 2 more games against the Blackhawks. They've got the Sharks coming up. I think they've got the Ducks as well. The schedule is favorable. They're going to make the playoffs. Where they finish in the playoffs is a different story. But as I've said many times, it's about the Kings being in playoff mode. It's about them coming out and playing a certain way, executing a certain way, regardless if they're playing a really bad team like Chicago or a really good team like they're going to face in Dallas on Saturday. The Kings need to be playing the right way heading into the playoffs. When the season starts, it's not like, okay, regular season's over, now let's start playing really hard for the playoffs. No, you want to be peaking at the right time. So big picture, Kings playing very well. Even the game against St. Louis, I thought there were a lot of good things there as far as how they came out. Some things to clean up, as we heard Jim Hiller say. But in the end, if they played their game like they've played against the Islanders, against the Blackhawks, then I think the Kings have a chance to do some good things. Up next, we're going to talk about the Kings taking a step up in competition against Dallas. And where are the Kings in the standings right now? That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April the 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with that 3% match. The offer is good through April the 30th. Get Robinhood right now at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information, claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Marketing Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. The LA Kings face the Dallas Stars 5 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. The Kings right back in action against the Stars. We just saw Dallas last Saturday. They looked very good in a 4-0 win over the Kings. Stars are coming off back-to-back losses. They lost a big one, 4-3 against the Florida Panthers the other night. That was a game that a lot of people feel could very well be a Stanley Cup final preview. The Stars had a 3-0 lead on home ice. Then they allowed 4 straight goals and lost. And then they lost 6-2 to the Devils in their last game on Thursday. So Dallas coming off a couple of losses. Maybe they'll be in a bad mood. Maybe they're starting to play not quite as good as they have been most of the year. We shall see. It is Mike Modano's statue night in Dallas. If you don't know, Hall of Famer Mike Modano, one of the greatest players in Stars history, started off as a Minnesota North Star, ended up as a Dallas Star. He is going to have a statue out in front of him. I believe it's called the American Airlines Arena there in Dallas. Anyway, there's a special night for the Dallas Stars. So will they be motivated by that? Will it play no factor at all? Don't know. But the Kings obviously want to take that momentum from the Chicago game into the Dallas game. I thought it was good for the Kings to get off to that big lead. It meant that in the second and third period, they knew they probably had enough goals. So it was, they could give more ice time to guys like Alex Turcotte and Alex Laferriere and Trevor Lewis and Blake Lizotte, and get, Kempe and Kopitar and, those guys get a little extra rest playing back-to-back nights in Dallas. So hopefully that was the case. And it'll be interesting. David Rittich. I thought that Rittich would go against the Blackhawks and Cam Talbot would start against the Stars, but not the case. So remember, Talbot did have the start against Dallas last week in LA. So the Kings decided to go with David Rittich, give the Dallas Stars a little bit of a different look. So another big test for the LA Kings. In some ways, maybe they're kind of playing with house money, playing back-to-back games, having to fly from Chicago to Dallas and then play the next game against a very good team. Maybe you're not expecting too much from the LA Kings in this one. So maybe they come in a little loose. Maybe they feel like, this is something they don't have anything to lose in a sense in this one, but they still need to keep the standard going, right? They still need to keep playing the way they need to be playing, going down the stretch into the playoffs. So no excuses. Doesn't matter that they played the night before. Hopefully, again, taking some momentum into that game, another test against a very good team in the Dallas Stars. Now, the Kings were a part of only 2 games on the schedule on Friday, so the standings not really changing for anyone other than the Kings in the Pacific Division or in the Western Conference playoff race. So Edmonton, going into Saturday's action, has 83 points. They are in second place in the Pacific. The Kings gain ground on the Oilers for a potential home ice matchup in the first round of the playoffs. Kings now 79 points, so they're 4 points back of the Oilers. Nashville has 80 points, so they're the number 1 wildcard team, and they're likely going to be the number 1 wildcard team, or they're going to be a wildcard team. Vegas, 77 points. They did lose on Thursday to the Calgary Flames 4-1. The Golden Knights are struggling right now, which is not that sad to see, right? So Vegas is the number 2 wildcard team in the West. They're 2 points back of the Kings at this point going into Saturday. Minnesota, they've got 73 points. They're the first team on the outside looking in, so they're 4 points back of the Vegas Golden Knights for that final wildcard spot in the West. They beat the Ducks on Thursday, did the Wild 2-0. So if the playoffs started today, it would be the Kings against the Oilers in the first round of the playoffs. Checking games of interest coming up this weekend for the Kings. The Oilers will host the Avalanche on Saturday. Golden Knights will host the Devils on Sunday. Predators are at the Kraken on Saturday, and the Wild are at the Blues on Saturday. Now, if Vegas wins Sunday and the Kings lose in regulation on Saturday, the Golden Knights would take over that number 3 spot in the Pacific Division and knock the Kings into a wild card spot, the number 2 wild card spot. Both teams would have 79 points if the Golden Knights win and the Kings lose in regulation. And they both would have played 67 games. So Vegas has the tiebreaker because they have more regulation wins. If the Kings win on Saturday, or if they lose in overtime or a shootout, then even if Vegas wins on Sunday, LA would remain as the number 3 team in the Pacific because they would have more points than the Vegas Golden Knights. All right, it is time for some feedback. It is time for our Kings fan feedback show. We will do that here next. Check your emails here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, do you love making money, but also love spending money? Don't we all? Well, now you can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out in your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers like Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering their listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. So go to the app or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, let us get to your emails this week. Our first email comes from Brian in Los Alamitos. He's a regular emailer, and he says, as of the writing of this email, I was surprised to see Quentin Byfield has more goals and points than Alexis Lafreniere and Tim Stützle. If you don't know, those two players were taken first and third in the NHL draft the same year Quentin Byfield came out. He was the second pick. Brian continues, at the start of the season, I was hoping to see more progress from QB, but he has greatly exceeded my expectations. I believe he's an RFA at the end of the season. So what type of contract do you think the Kings will be giving him in terms of years and money? On the flip side, Arthur Kaliev's season has been so disappointing. I don't know whose fault his lack of development is, but it just seems like when he's given the opportunity to play, he doesn't do much with it. I was really surprised that he wasn't traded at the deadline. Lastly, I really hope the Kings are willing to hire a head coach during the offseason. I appreciate Jim Hiller, but I'm not sure the make hockey fun again philosophy is enough to lead the team to a championship, and I fear that they will not make it past the first round once again. It just seems like an effective head coach is the last piece to the puzzle, not more players. Thank you for all the hard work that you do for us Kings fans, and the accolades you receive from your Locked On bosses are greatly deserved. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Brian. For Quentin Byfield, I think the Kings would absolutely love to lock him up long term. We're talking like an 8-year deal, maybe in the range of him getting like $5 million a year, something like that. And that's obviously a big step up, but it's pretty clear. I don't think anyone would have a big argument with this. It's pretty clear Q is turning into a special player. Now he's not there yet. At this point, I would say he's turning into a very good player, but I think there's certainly more that he can give. He's still young. He's still learning. The confidence and the experience should only raise his level of play and production going forward. So I don't know exactly the ins and outs of what the Kings have as far as the salary cap, how that's going to work. I know they want to re-sign Matt Roy, but I think if the Kings definitely want to lock him up long term, because the price is only going to go up as we go along. If you give him like a bridge deal, you're just kind of delaying the inevitable. So I don't think there's any doubt that Quentin Byfield has shown the Kings he is worth the long-term investment. So like I said, they are looking to lock him up long-term if they can. Arthur Kaliev is certainly interesting, and I agree with you. I'm surprised they didn't move him. I wouldn't be surprised if they move him at the NHL draft. You got to earn your ice time, but at the same time, it's hard for him to earn ice time when they're not playing him. And I guess if you ask Jim Hiller, and I don't know that he's actually specifically said this, he would, if you asked him why is Trevor Lewis playing over Arthur Kaliev, he'd probably tell you, well, Kaliev's advantage over Lewis is his scoring ability, but he isn't scoring. And Trevor Lewis plays defense, and he checks, and he does a lot of the other things. So if Kaliev's advantage is his scoring touch, and he isn't scoring, then why would I put him in the lineup? That would be, I think, what he would probably say. As far as hiring another coach in the offseason, certainly it'll depend on what the Kings do in the playoffs. If they go on some kind of a magical run and go deep in the playoffs, then you could see Jim Hiller getting a chance, and maybe you could argue he deserves that chance. But yes, I would expect the Kings to go out and find an established coach to hire in the offseason. Our next email comes from Ray. He is an everydayer in Torrance and a first-time emailer. He says, I've been a Kings fan for over 20 years. I've attended close to 10 home games this season. I think they've lost all but 2. Thanks for all you do. I always look forward to listening to your Kings coverage. I'm curious as to why we didn't let David Rittich starting against the Blues on Wednesday after having a shutout in the previous game against the Islanders. Do you think it would have changed the outcome on Wednesday? Who do you like to see starting in net at the start of the playoffs? Personally, I think it's too close to tell. I think both goaltenders make a good case for the starting position. I'm curious to see Rittich do another run. Also, I'd 100% rather see the Kings face the Canucks in the first round. My heart could not take another first-round elimination at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers. Hope to make sending in emails a regular thing. Thanks for reading. Well, Ray, thank you for sending. And we had another question about the goaltending, so let me kind of tie these two together. This from Edwin in Brea, who is the enemy of fun. He hates it when the Kings dance after a win. So Edwin says, so at this point, I'm just hoping the Kings make the playoffs. Edwin, they're going to make the playoffs. He says, the question is, who's our starting goalie? I'm now not confident in our tandem, but I think David Rittich is our best chance of winning, even though Cam is more consistent, has a more consistent foundation-wise in skill. Rittich is more of a clutch save factor, definitely in the third period and overtime. Plus, he can take over a game when needed, while Cam, to me, needs more of the Kings' play in front of him to help. Keep up the good work and go Kings, go. I would say Cam Talbot is going to be the goaltender to start the playoffs unless something dramatically changes at this point. While I think that both are capable, Rittich is more, to me, kind of going against what Edwin thinks. I think Rittich more to me is the guy who needs the help in front of him. He'll make the solid saves. If he can see it, he'll stop it for the most part, but he doesn't have that, rob you type of ability, generally speaking. Cam Talbot does. And that I go back to that Ottawa game where he made that diving glove save across the crease. He had a couple of big saves. He had a couple of big saves in the Chicago game in the first period. So I think he has more of that game-changing type of save potential than David Rittich. But we'll see. Let's see what Rittich does against Dallas. If he comes in big and has a huge game and he helps backstop the Kings to a win, maybe that is opens that debate up a little bit more. That is going to do it for today's show. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email. Really appreciate it. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday, we'll recap that Kings Stars game, let you know what the Kings homestand looks like coming up next week, and we'll also have a rain report as well. Thank you again to everyone who took the time to send an email. Really appreciate it. Also, would love you to stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter, X, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.